Welcome to the Unenlightened Podcast. I had been thinking about getting this podcast started for a good 6 months now, and it looks like it took a complete lockdown from a global pandemic for me to actually get the job done. So here we are, episode 1 of the podcast. I do want to talk a little about why I started this podcast before we get started with the actual episode. People who know me know that I blog about things I find interesting, and people who really paid attention to this blog would have noticed that this blog had been getting very little love of late and was practically inactive. The reason for the lack of activity is not because I have run out of interesting things to talk about, or because I've become too lazy to write. It's because I've been feeling more and more uncomfortable writing about things that I'm not completely certain about. Putting stuff out as a blog feels like making a permanent record of my opinions to me. And the problem with this is, I'm at a point in my life where I'm extremely uncertain about a lot of things. I often found myself critiquing the way some of my old blogs were worded, and sometimes even disagreeing with my own older views. A written blog format for me feels too rigid to be compatible with my constantly changing views. With a podcast, I believe my tone would allow for listeners to better gauge my uncertainty on things. I would also like this podcast to be a celebration of this uncertainty because without admitting a lack of knowledge, there is no learning. For episode number 1, I had a good friend of mine, Harish. I expect this to be the case for most podcasts, me conversing with my friends. This podcast did have to be recorded over the internet, and the quality is hence mediocre at best. I am of course new to this and have really learned to appreciate the skill required to be a truly fluent speaker. I expect listeners to observe both of us thinking a lot on air and being truly scatterbrained at parts, but I believe we can only get better with more episodes and practice. I do want to thank Harish for being super understanding about all of this. In this podcast, we talk about religion, specifically Hinduism. We talk about social media in India. We talk about free will. We talk about consciousness and much more. Without further delay, I bring you episode 1 of the Unenlightened Podcast. Okay, we have Harish on the podcast today. Hello, Harish.
Hey Rishi, thanks for having me today.
Before we get started, congratulations are in order for Harish. He's a newly married man, so congratulations.
Thanks, man. Doesn't feel any different now.
Okay, so let's jump right into it. So I have high hopes for this podcast. I feel like there's an interesting conversation to be had here, especially given our history. I think the last good conversation that I had with Harish is when I used to live with him, and that's almost 2 years ago. I feel, or I kind of sense that there has been a slight shift in the way he's been thinking about certain things. But yeah, I'm really excited to dig into that more. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn the mic on you, Harish, and have you describe your current stance on religion.
All right, so that was a quick start. So just to jump right into the topic, if I have to speak about religion, I believe coming from an Orthodox Indian Hindu culture, uh, I strongly believe that I was brought up in a family that was strictly following the principles and doctrines that was imposed on the society by the religion. So I had no other choice than to basically uh, follow the herd. So
Mm.
at the start, I didn't have any problem in believing that there was God associated to every religion, and it didn't even have the uh, thought process running behind my mind to question that at all. And my personal understanding was every religion has a God. That God is the superpower above me that's going to be deciding my future. Uh, in layman terms, I did not have any questions, and I was just following it as in when I got a chance. And until recently, I had a lot of experiences that I wanted to uh, share with you, especially based on some of my recent hobbies, I'd say. And that's listening to a lot of interesting podcasts and following a lot of different leaders in specific science and neuroscience topics, and that's trying to understand. And I wanted to say it's primarily uh, giving given me a different perspective of my ideology and I would like to say I'm under the transition from breaking down my own ideology and going to a completely different shift.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So, do you think there was like a tipping point that kind of started off this shift, or you was it just something that built up over time?
I think it was built up over time, and I don't really know if there was any specific incident that was the icebreaker. I would say, uh, but I still had the uh, constant idea that I have to learn from different perspective and opinions of my peers, and that led to believe that led, I believe, to reason out from the positives and the negatives from each and every aspects. So when I started to understand that every different person who follows a different religion, no matter what ideology that he follows, uh, if someone follows a religion, if someone is a theist or someone who believes in God or religion, and if he's a staunch follower of that, I strongly believe that he has a strict principle that allows him to lead his life based on certain morals and principles. And if someone who does not believe in religion and a superpower uh, that's managing the whole universe, I believe he works in a very a pragmatic way, and his life is more of trying to understand every outcome based on uh, what's happening right now in their life. So my tipping point, I would say, is by trying to learn from different people and trying to reason out which is good and bad from their opinion.
Okay, I think that was a really interesting point right there. So you seem to make a distinction between how religious people get their morality and how non-believers get their morality. Do you think, in a practical sense, does it make any difference? Because I will be going in depth about that, hopefully sometime soon. But uh, do you think there's like an obvious difference, or like a one is better than the other kind of difference between having your moral values from religious text or religious beliefs and having your moral compass from elsewhere, from secular uh, sources?
Just to understand the question, uh, is your question about
Okay,
how?
my question basically is so you did make a distinction, right? That religious people get their morality from religion, but
Mhm,
non-believers get it from, you said, pragmatic, like taking each day as it comes, I guess,
mhm.
and dealing with problems as is. Do you think one system is better than the other, or is it just two ways at looking at the same problem? And do you think both are equally effective?
I would definitely say there is no one system that would be the universal solution for every society or the whole human being.
Mm.
So the way I will approach that question is by trying to understand what works for each individual. If there's
Mm.
someone who has the ability to understand the science behind uh, each occurrence or each events in their lives, then I don't think there's any need or there's any reasoning uh, that goes behind the topic
Having
of
a god?
religion.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't necessarily need a god to tell me that the reason why this particular event happened uh, is because of the good deeds that you did in the past. I don't need that. So
Mm.
if I am considering myself as a person who uh, lives in an experimental world and who believes in factual uh, events, I would rather believe on the science, or I would have to say I would rather believe on the data than anything else. Does that answer the
Okay.
question?
Yeah, I think that was a. And kind of gonna play devil's advocate here because I've heard a few people answer this question slightly differently, and I think you also answered that part here. And I think that was a key distinction here. You said that if a person is able to scientifically reason out and come up with a logical explanation for his problems, of course he's not gonna have a need for any kind of external power there. The most common pushback I get on this, because this is exactly the way I also answer this question, is that in the case of children, by default, they don't have that kind of logical reasoning that adults possess. So a lot of people seem to think that for a kid that's growing up, it's just easier to say, "Hey, don't do this." There's an invisible power that's always watching you, and if you lie, you're going to be punished. Rather than trying to explain in detail the cause and effect of the wrong deeds that he does. So, what do you think about that? Should we uh, maybe come up with a different system that works for kids? Because clearly, trying to reason with kids is not an easy thing to do.
I definitely agree with you on the point to a certain extent where you said uh, kids right now primarily are growing up in a
Mm,
society, and that society is dominating their childhood with with the with the with the non-existential forces
mm,
that's overpowering uh, their lives, and that's basically deciding what they have to do. So I would
okay.
definitely agree. I would definitely agree with you on that. Where
Mm,
we should try to see if there is a different solution that we might have to approach.
mm.
Uh, and
I
if go ahead.
I personally think that there is. So
Oh, do you have a
there
solution? I
are
mean, I'd be interested to listen to that though.
or no, I'm just saying that there has to be a solution, right? Because there are countries in this planet that are extremely secular, that don't have any kind of moral compass, that is based on a supernatural power, and kids there just grow up fine. They don't turn out to be murderers or terrorists any more than the next country. So clearly there is a way. Um, so there has to be. Uh, like you said, maybe it's just pragmatic, or maybe just kids, they learn that on their own. And there might also be a biological backing for that kind of morality, because we are a social animal, and for example, kids that are rude to each other, uh, just by way of natural selection, they don't get along with a lot of people, and they hardly get the satisfaction of being part of a bigger community, which is essential to development of their social facilities. So maybe there's like a biological urge for certain behaviors to be prioritized, like being kind, saying the truth. But again, I don't I'm not too certain about this. This is something that I have been thinking about and have found interesting, but I don't know yet if the exact step-by-step guide, I guess, on how you would teach morality to little kids.
I understand. Now that I think of it, I am going to try to see if I can make sense to you. And when you talked about the way kids grow up in our current environment, I
Hmm.
believe we have the technological advancements that can support uh, anything and everything that's around us with scientific facts. And at the same
Mm,
time, you should also understand how overwhelming it can get to someone who is trying to scientifically prove uh, the effect of a certain event is due to this cause. So,
especially to
and
a kid.
that's yes, especially, and I believe from a parenting perspective, uh, if I am looking at my child and if I want him or her to understand that uh, by my definition of saying that this is and if a this is an event that would give you that will add that will have a positive value and have a positive result at the end of this event, I would definitely try to give them a, a, a logical reasoning behind that. But if they don't seem to get that, and if they're still not able to perceive that information, I don't think that I would have any problem going back uh, to my parents' technique of saying, you know what, if you do this, there's someone sitting on top of us who would give you a lot of good things in the future. So I more or less think that there's no one universal way of approaching this problem, but
Mm,
I would definitely second you on your thought process, saying that we might have to bring in something that can transition our future into something more realistic rather than
mm,
having a superficial story, if I would say.
okay. I did think that the last point that you made is kind of dangerous there, saying that it's okay to fall back on the religious stories if logical reasoning doesn't work. Uh, why why don't we just fall back onto traditional, like if you do something bad, you're getting a timeout, and maybe like a reward system, maybe give them something that they like for what they do. But again, I feel like morality has to have some kind of logical basis, or you're just doing something for the reward that you expect in the future, which I feel is a bad attitude to have. But okay, I think this feels like a dead end, so let's kind of switch topics over to a little bit. From the tone you take on religion, I feel like you're not actively critical of people who are religious. You seem to have your own thing, and you let people do their own thing. Is that an accurate representation of your thoughts?
Yes, I would definitely say so, and I would always want to take a neutral standpoint on that because uh, at the end of the day, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and at the same time, if anything at all seems illogical to me, uh, and I would definitely point that out in terms
Hmm.
of going out of their way. If something happens that goes out of my moral scope, I would try my level best to try to stop them from doing that. But if it's going out of my control, I would say it's every man for himself. So I would definitely
Okay.
take a neutral standpoint on that. Yes.
Okay, this is, I think, where we start to digress, I guess. I do make it an active job of mine to call people out. Uh,
Don't
I
worry
don't,
about it. I've been with you for 2 years, so I know how it is. So
yeah, I know it's not my crowning moment, but yeah, it's just something that I can't resist, man. I don't know. Okay, but yeah, like I would like to. The reason that I brought this up is okay. Before I dive into that, I want to make it extremely clear to the audience that when we talk about religion, it's primarily Hinduism. We're talking about our culture, the culture that we grew up in, and that would basically be South India and Hinduism. So this might not appeal to everyone who's listening, but there's a little caveat right there. Um, okay, so what I'm gonna do now is kind of break down Hinduism into almost three tiers. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with the most extreme believers. Okay, so these are the people who are going out and murdering people for eating cows. These are people who are militant against non-believers, who have a hatred towards Muslims or people of other religion. So I'm gonna call these people the extremists. So these are analogous to the extremist on every other religion, and I think most people, most sane people, would agree that these people should not, have any kind of authority over political, or they should not be allowed to do what they want. The next tier of people, I'm going to call these people the moderates, and these people make up inevitably the largest uh, population of Hindus. So these are the people who, don't eat beef, but don't go out of their way to say that everyone else should not eat beef. These are the people who follow some degree of ritualistic practices. It might be a belief in astrology, might be a belief in certain rituals that they do. It might be making donations to a temple. Uh, and I believe that these people make up the, the significant population of Hindus.
I
And
agree.
then there's the, I'm gonna call these people secular, and I'm gonna kind of group in the people who are openly non-believers and people who have a personal belief system, people who don't exactly subscribe to Hindu ritualism, people who are openly calling out the bullshit of numerology or astrology, saying it's a waste of time. But I don't like, if they have their own personal belief system and it doesn't affect anyone else. I'm really not bothered there. I'm just gonna group them along with non-believers because they essentially don't have any religious effect on anyone outside of themselves. Would you agree with this, assessment of the three tiers of religion?
Yes, I would definitely do that because that sums up everything about religion.
Okay.
And I really like the way that you didn't dive deep into the segmentation of each and every one. So, but this pretty much sums everything. Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. Okay. So my criticism of you being okay. So I'm gonna assume that you are, even though you said I'm gonna be respectful of everyone's feelings. I don't expect you to be defending the extremists, right? I'm pretty sure you're gonna condemn those kind of acts of violence, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so we don't have any kind of disagreement there. But when it comes to the moderates, I feel like you're more apologetic to those kind of beliefs. They have their own kind of things. Okay, if that guy believes in astrology, it's up to him. But you have to understand that these are a set of beliefs that are actually harmful to that person, or could be harmful. It could essentially be harmful. You have to agree that a person is better off by logically reasoning his way um, through at problem solving than letting it in the hands of complete randomness. Uh, so I feel like it's almost irresponsible in a sense to let these people be and watch them maybe suffer, I guess. What are your thoughts on that?
I would definitely uh, try to break this down into a couple of different answers, maybe try to piece it together at the end. So the
Hmm.
first thing is I would definitely not support the tier one sample of uh,
Okay.
groups that I would say,
Hmm.
which is trying to do the extreme events that are happening currently around the globe,
Hmm.
using religion in the name of using religion as a tool uh, to try and emphasize terrorism. I mean, I would go and you know what not. So there's a lot of events happening right now around the
Yes,
world that's
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
that's basically terrorizing people,
Hmm.
and that's something that I would definitely resist, and I would always be against that kind of an ideology. And
Okay.
trying to uh, drop down to the second section is where you talked about the moderate believers. I would try to uh, disagree with you on that because I don't necessarily think I have uh, I have the freedom to go and try to reason out to everyone and have them believe what I say is the right or wrong. So if I can put it differently, uh, I don't want to be uh, the advocate of someone's uh, choices. So everybody has their right to believe in what they think is morally right, and I would want them to choose what's right or wrong. But at the same time, I'm going to do whatever I can from in my power to explain them and have them understand the consequences of their study or of their process. So I don't necessarily think I would be irresponsible uh, if I don't indulge myself in explaining uh, the moral policing.
Mm.
I don't want to be a moral police for someone who already thinks what he's doing is right, as long as it does not affect the, uh, the larger group of population. Uh, I don't have any problem with that, and I don't
But
see any
that's
problem with that.
the thing, right? It does affect a lot of people. So that's the entire problem here. Like you have the largest population of Hindus who think it is okay to believe that a set of mantras or stars lining up is going to decide their future. And I want to make one thing clear here. I don't expect you to go on stages and try and call everyone stupid for believing in something. My I think that I think you also agree with this from the way you explained it. You said that you would do everything in your power uh, with the people around you to try and explain logically what their stance is, and that is actually all that I expect. So change has to start from within the moderates, right? So if more and more moderates are starting to call out people that follow these practices that have no evidence of having any effect on their lives, then you see a large number of moderates turn more secular. Like they're going from tier one, tier two to tier one almost, and you have this increase in population of people in the first tier, and that can only be for the good, right? So yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't think that anyone should, or maybe they could, like people who have a large audience, people who are influential over people, they need to have a responsibility to be really careful with what they say. This is where I have some criticism of the Prime Minister of India, and also some of the other religious leaders who have a huge influence over a large number of people. And when they go out spewing uh, all these thoughts of ritualism, that just negatively impacts the Indian society. I feel like they need to have a huge responsibility for the things that they say, because they're affecting a lot of people. As for people like you and me, our effort has to be focused on the people around us, and the generations that follow. I feel we have a responsibility there to be more rational and more logical about the way uh, people think. Would you
Mhm.
agree with that, or is there any pushback on that?
I, if I take a step back and analyze what you just said, I think I would support you on that because I'm gonna start talking as I'm thinking. So I'm just trying to process everything as much as I can. So
Yeah, I
I would
think
I would
both of us are.
so
Go on.
I would definitely I would definitely say that to an extent, a lot of the moderates who I consider as myself and you at the moment are trying to reason out to people on the two extremes, to bring them down to a common ground, to understand, to make them believe that when you started talking about uh, the example of the current Prime Minister of India and the sort of influence uh, his party has on the entire nation. I, if I, as an individual, I do not have an iota of understanding or support. I wouldn't support that kind of ideology where their current rules and the current uh, the bills that are getting passed in the political climate has anything to do with the improvement of a country in the future. The economy
Mm,
is down and it's spiraling down, and the amount of the religious rights that's happening specifically that involves the extremists at the moment are just skyrocketing, and it's deeply saddening me, uh,
mm,
because that's bringing out a negative impact or a negative image, and that's what globally is viewed at the moment as India which is the strongest, uh, which is one of the largest uh, democracy in the world, has no power, and it's solely looked at a Hindu nationalist country. Would you
mm.
agree to that? Would you agree to that at the moment?
Yeah, it does look threateningly close to that, but I do feel like we're not there yet. I wouldn't call us that yet, but yeah, I do fear that we might end up there.
And to add to the point, I just wanted to keep going on with the comment. I would still think that moderates like you and me are trying their level best uh, to reason out and explain
Mm,
to the larger group of population. But I think it's getting suppressed by the political powers,
mm,
and that gets suppressed, and our voices are basically faded out on such a large
mm,
population. And I'm not saying that as as an excuse, and
mm,
it's no excuse for me to say I want to be in my shelter and I want to make sure that I'm safe under my roof. I as someone uh, who thinks in a logical and a pragmatic way, I would want everybody to think like me, but at the same time, I would I would definitely not. I think at some point in time I would be a little uncomfortable, and I would, when I start calling out people, particularly uh, for their beliefs that's deep rooted within their culture and society, that's going to hurt their feelings. I believe that's what uh, the mankind is built around, isn't it? So
yeah, but you have to agree that there has to be a distinction, or a value distinction, between claims that have evidence to support that it's true, and others that are based on complete baloney, right? You cannot expect both those values to hold, the same kind of moral equity. You cannot expect people to believe. So, what if someone was to believe that I think this was an example used by Sam Harris in one of his debates. So he's like, what if there was a person who believed that Elvis Presley was still alive, right?
Yep.
The entire society would look at him with with such a gaze that he would be forced or he would just be laughed at for having that kind of a belief. But if that belief was a religious belief, we're all afraid to offend him because it's going to hurt his feelings. Of course, the
Hmm.
guy who believes Elvis, if you call him an idiot, it is going to hurt his feelings, right?
Hmm.
But we still do it anyway. So there's this huge double standard for religious beliefs that I think has to go away. There has to be a clear distinction between factually true statements and statements that are based on imaginary concepts that are not true. And no matter where these ideas emerge from, even if it's religion or if it's from culture, if it's bad and if it affects uh, the entire society in a negative way, we should still be calling them out on it. Um, uh, so that's my entire, and I think that's the only real place where we disagree at all, because in everything else, I feel like we're in agreement here.
I would say so too. Yeah, but I would always try to play in a neutral standpoint, because at some point when that transition happens for moderates like us to go
Mm,
and try to police those who are in the other extremes, it's going to hurt. Yes, I agree with you on that. But at the same time, what are the moderates willing to pay the price uh, to go to that extent? Are you and I willing to go to that extent? Perhaps. Is
mm.
the larger group of moderates willing to go to that extent? I don't think so. I highly doubt that.
Well, uh, okay, I'm gonna in a more realistic way. I don't expect the current huge group of moderates to suddenly become more secular. Okay,
Hmm.
but I do feel like we have the ability for the next generation to be brought up in a much more secular world. That way, maybe in 20 years from now, we have a larger population of people
Hmm.
who are way more logical and don't believe in as many of these ritualisms as the current population of Hindus do. I think
I agree.
it's already headed in that direction. It's already
Yes.
happening, but uh, we do have an active responsibility to push for that kind of logical reasoning, especially in the current time, because I feel like almost the theocracies are making a comeback almost in the last 5 years. Like people seem to get more and more irrational for some reason. uh, that does kind of worry me, and that's the only reason why I'm having this conversation at all. Because I think about 2 years ago,
Hmm.
when we had a talk, like my usual ending statement would be, just see 20 years from now you guys are not gonna have any religion to debate about. But now
I still
I'm
hear that.
yeah, but now I feel like I'm more worried now, because it seems like people subscribe to that mob culture where they identify to be a part of a bigger group, and they want to be a part of some kind of a cult or some kind of a bigger group that and I feel like religion in the bad way might make a comeback, which I'm worried about.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I would also second you on that, because just like how you mentioned, specifically when we talk about the Indian government, the way it's transitioning into our future, uh,
Mm,
this is exactly what I think is going to spiral us down in a global image, when we see when two entities which have no relation altogether uh, is superimposed into one.
mm.
I'm talking about politics, the Indian politics, which is unfortunately strongly correlated to
Hinduism.
religion,
Yeah.
Hinduism, and religion. And I think it's basically a catalyst that's used by a lot of our leaders, and that's basically driving a huge number of population into making those irrational decisions. And I want to say that I don't uh, really see that kind of a future where people get more religious and
Mm,
people make more irrational decisions, and they make uh, from a realistic standpoint. I don't really know if the moderates are going to incline towards the extremists, but I would strongly. I think the whole sample, since you split that in two, is going to have a constant shift towards the future, and the timeline is going to keep moving forward, and the
mm,
population is going to travel along with that. And I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a huge shift in the extremist population,
mm.
because of the fact that the younger population at the moment are realizing that uh, people right now are making
Do you think we might be
they're
in a? I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you think we might be in a bubble right there when you said that you think that the more rational population is growing? Because first of all, we are from a state that's extremely, or you know, tends to keep religion out of politics, and also most of the people that we interact with are educated people, right? Most of our friends, they went to college. A lot of us have master's degrees. So our circle, our bubble, seems to be one of a more secular, educated one. Do you think it would be accurate to make that judgment based on the people around us? Because I don't know. Like, I honestly don't know, because I feel the exact same way. I feel like a lot more people around me are being more and more logical, but the country seems to be doing the exact opposite thing. So I feel like there might be a disconnect between the people we're surrounded by and the rest of the country. Do you
I,
do you
I,
think
I,
so
I,
too?
I don't think so, because
Hmm.
when you talk about your specific, your inner circle,
Mm,
or your peers who are making those logical connections, I think that branches out into uh, a significantly uh, a larger population, which
okay.
at the end of the day would bound into the moderates.
Mm,
But at the same time, the reason why we have the extreme uh, events happening right now is because the people on power, they're trying to they're the ones that make a call. So
mm,
I believe those people, I think it's really going to be difficult for us uh, to try to reason with people in power, and I
mm,
think there's no point in arguing uh, with people who have the ideology which directly disagrees with you and me. So
mm,
I don't necessarily think that we are in a bubble. I think this
mm,
is only going to be a larger expanding population moving forward, because as moderates, we know what's right or wrong. You have your own definition of your own morality, and I have mine, backed up with whatever evidence I have. So I don't necessarily think it's going to shrink in the future, but
okay.
I would strongly say that we're, at least in my view, we're trying to voice out our disagreement. If I am going back in the timeline 30 or 40 years behind now, it's going to be extremely difficult for me to voice out my opinion. I would
Mm,
be, my voice would be mumbled, and it'll fade away uh, immediately. But at least not right now, I can make a stand anywhere I can and
mm,
say, you know what, your your ideology is uh, completely has no base, and
mm,
it's not based with any facts, it's not based with any evidence, and
mm.
I have the power with me. So with that being said, I strongly think we are moving towards the right direction, but I won't say the journey is there yet. I think it's going to be a long, tough battle.
Okay. I'm glad you have a more optimistic opinion than I do. Uh, okay. I feel like we've been stuck here for a little bit, but I want to make a couple of comments on the last thing that you said. You talked a little bit about people in power
Mhm.
being irresponsible with the things they say, and I think that's a huge problem too. I completely agree with you on that. So here's another big question here. Do you think people in power should be silenced, or they should be policed for about saying, things that are not objectively true or factually inaccurate statements? Or should we expect the audience to be educated enough to call them out on their bullshit? What do you think is more realistic there? should there be like active legislature against people saying factually incorrect things? But I fear that would be a against the freedom of speech right there, like if people are not allowed to say something. So I would ideally want people to be educated enough to call people out on the bullshit that they say. So what do you think is realistically possible?
I would say realistically, uh, the the leader in power should have the responsibility to be more conscious of his own speech and his own decision that
Hmm.
affects the larger group of people. Because let's face it, it's going to be extremely difficult for me to go and expect the larger group of population, unfortunately, who have differences of opinion, and they're expecting the leader to show them the right direction.
Mm.
And if that's the case, if you're talking about a billion people,
Oh
and
yeah.
I think it's going to be extremely difficult, and it's going to be a mammoth uh, in terms of trying to reason out with that huge number. So I think it's the responsibility of the leader on the top to make a more pragmatic decision, or a practical or a logical decision. And I agree with you. And I would also say that it's going to be difficult, no matter who that leader is, to come up with a decision that's going to support the larger group of population, because
Mm.
at the end of the day, it's going to be difficult for him as well, him or her as well. So that's why he should be having an immediate team of people who should have the power to question
Mm.
his decision and his choices. And I think that's why uh, I want to say my country has that legislature already in place, but that's unfortunately not being followed.
Wait, we
I
have
honestly
a what? I am not aware of this. Do we have a legislature that prevents people from saying something? Is
no,
that?
no. What I was trying to say was, there's already a team that's supporting the leader. Uh,
Oh, you're talking
to
about. Okay, you're talking about the houses. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the segment of how the government is split
Mm.
up, and how the leaders group is basically supported by his high officers, right? So
Mm.
uh, so his ministers and members of the legislature. So uh, they are responsible, equally responsible, to support him in making that the right choice. So
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely not think that it's going to be a practical solution to expect the audience to
Mm-hmm.
be more educated. I don't think it's realistic.
Again.
Why would you think so? I wanted to try to
Oh
understand that.
my. Yeah. First of all, yeah, I think I agree with you again on this. I did not expect this podcast to go like this. Me agreeing with you on everything. But uh, yeah, I do believe that people who have any kind of influence on a large set of people need to get the advice of experts, or they need to have some kind of counsel before they go out there and spew rubbish at all their followers. Because, like you said, yeah, there's a huge amount of people who are going to follow what they say blindly. The only reason that in an ideal world, uh, if you want to have a truly intelligent society, I guess, you would have enough educated people in it that nobody, no matter how influential, is able to get away with saying stupid things. So even if you are the at the highest office in the country, if you say something idiotic, like there's enough people to call you out on that. That would be uh, the kind of society that I would love to live in. But I don't know, and I have to agree with you that it's pretty unrealistic at the point. So yeah, people in power really need to start listening to experts. If you don't have
And
any disagreement with that, I think it's time to change topics. Would you agree?
yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay. Uh, Although I am gonna switch topics a bit, I don't think it's going too far from what we're currently talking. It is on ritualism. I want to talk a little bit of how about how the Indian government has been handling the entire pandemic situation. First of all, I want to say that compared to the country I'm currently in, the United States,
Hmm.
I do think that the Indian government was slightly faster to react, and the measures have been extremely stringent. So I'm not gonna sit here and complain about the actions that they did take. I want to give them credit where it's due because they did manage to lock down the entire country fairly rapidly. But the point that I want to talk about is the amount of symbolism and ritualism that went along with it. Uh, Especially I think we did three things. I guess the prime minister made a speech on an evening, and he expected the entire country to be locked down by midnight the same day. Then he came out. I think this was March 5th, and he said, was this 25th? I might be completely wrong here, but he said, uh, we're gonna have a clap at 5 p.m. for 5 minutes for all the doctors and the healthcare workers, and then more recently we had one where we lit dias for 9 minutes at 9 p.m. If so, this is quite clearly, but I want to still give him the benefit of the doubt here. But to me, as an outsider who knows this Indian prime minister, this looks clearly like some kind of a ritualistic, like a symbolism thing or a numerology thing that he expects the entire country to get back on. Uh, Again, I want to make it absolutely obvious that I support what the government is doing outside of these rituals, and I do also understand that we do need to show solidarity as a nation during this time. But what exactly is the benefit of having it done for 9 minutes at 9 p.m. and why did it have to be so ritualized? Is my question. What are your thoughts on that?
I would. Wow, this is going to be interesting because I had a similar feeling, just like how you vented out your frustration on that. I have
Mhm.
a different sort of a heartburn, I would say, when I started looking at images and when I started looking at some of the videos that came out on the social media, where people started flocking out and completely stopped to realize why this was initially started. I think the whole intention behind the prime minister's uh, decision to bring in those two specific type of events was to unite the country in some sort of an aspect,
Mhm.
to join them to a certain cause, to try to bring a little bit of positivity
Mhm.
to their lives now that they're basically in a totally lockdown situation and people are basically panicked. And I think it was brought out in a good gesture, but I think the way it trickled down into the larger mass was completely unacceptable. I think people misinterpreted it completely. And to specify, and I wanted to break it down by two events. The first event, which happened on a specific date, where we were expected to clap uh, for as an appreciation to our healthcare workers and the frontline officers trying to fight the
Mhm.
pandemic. I think that was uh, totally mistaken by the larger group of masses when they flocked out and they started to do a walkout in the streets with roughly about 100 to 200 people.
Mhm.
So that is something that it was saddening to me as someone who's sitting in a whole new country, and I felt sorry for those people. And at the
Mhm.
same time, I don't I don't really know if the whole situation was expected by the to the prime minister. To be honest with you, because I wasn't expecting him. I think it would have been a shocker for him as well. Is where I'm going because
Yeah, but
I
let's
think he.
be
Mhm,
like India was not this was not an original idea, right? Like there was other countries that were doing it. Um, they were doing the clap. I think they were doing it every Thursday in the United Kingdom or something like that. But they've been doing it on in different places. But why did the reaction? And I have to say that there have been instances like this on in other
mhm,
countries. I think Brazil just broke out into a parade of trumpets, something like that. And
mhm,
there have been instances in the US where you've had kids go out on spring break holidays, have the coronavirus parties and stupid shit
mhm,
like that. And you've had, there's also been people in Italy who went out to play Pokemon. So I feel like every country does have its own set of stupid people.
mhm,
But Yeah, I do kind of agree with you that it felt like, or maybe because we follow a lot of Indian people on social media, but it did feel like it did go wrong way more in India than it did in different countries. But yeah, that might be totally optics here, because we do follow a lot of Indian pages, so we
Mhm.
might be completely wrong on that without the statistics. But uh, my like this is why I want to stay away from discussing events. I would rather discuss ideas, because ideas um, are fixed, and events, like we don't have the right data. We don't know if it was a success or a failure.
Mhm.
So let's try and stick to the idea of ritualism here. So, do you think that it's actually valuable to have that kind of uh, you know, a symbolic representation, and why do you think the Indian society is so attracted by it?
I absolutely have no answer for specifically understanding why India has to be so stringent in following a specific set of rules, and the
Mm.
idea behind following certain sort of ritualism is especially the one where the government expected all the houses to light a diya for 9 minutes at 9 o'clock. It totally does not make sense. So I I I think the intention behind that, I wanted to, and again, I wanted to sound optimistic, and I wanted to take just the positive at down the end of the tunnel. And I wanted to say the intention behind all of that is to, brighten the mood of the larger population. But I, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense for me to, light a candle for 9 minutes, and completely switch off the lights. And something that actually made sense was when I started looking at certain officials getting really worried about that decision, because once when the government started giving out the decision, and when that rolled out to the entire nation, these the electricity commission in
Oh
India,
yeah.
they started fearing that the power grid could collapse when we shut down for 9 minutes, and when we start back up, it could be a whole new chaos. But I
Yeah.
mean, thankfully and fortunately, nothing happened. And but this, I don't really know what's the
Mm.
idea behind that, and I don't necessarily. I would still want to stick away
Mm.
from indulging in understanding all that to get all together. But I hope the intention was just to bring the unity together of the entire population.
Okay. I have a few theories.
Oh,
Uh,
you do?
yeah, I've been thinking about this.
Okay.
I have a few theories, not from the government standpoint. Like I said, I kind of want to stay away from that, because right now, despite everything that has kind of gone wrong, I feel like we as a nation are doing really well to deal with the pandemic. So I don't want to be too critical of the government on that right now. So I'm gonna think of this more from the perspective of Indians, and why Indians are so, obsessed. I think obsessed might be a strong word. More, how why Indians are so captivated by ritualism. So the first obvious one that comes to mind is that our entire culture and religion is a ritualistic one. So it might just it might have just struck a nerve with a lot of Indians, and they might find it, something that they could get behind, because it's so similar to a lot of their cultural things. Uh, Number two, uh, this one is pretty debatable, and there might be a huge bias here because I'm not a big fan of cinema in general. So I feel like Indian cinema has a huge history of being extremely theatric, and especially and extremely over the top, and creating these huge over the top gestures and like dance numbers and all of that, unrealistic things maybe. uh, and of course, we are the if I'm not wrong, we are the largest consumers of cinema in the world, in India. So uh, that might be an influence, but yeah, that might be a totally personal bias. But the third one, and the one that I want to talk about in detail, is social media. um, in all of these, in both of these instances, the first thing that happened, the second after the actual ritual was completed was everyone wanted to share this on their social media. Like
I
my
agree.
family group was flooded with like pictures of all my uncles and like holding all the candles and doing that and this. So clearly India has this of obsession with social media and showing off, that they belong to this larger group, and showing some kind of solidarity. Maybe that might be in a good way, but there clearly is a little bit of obsession with social media. What do you think about that?
I would definitely agree with you 100%, specifically because I had the exact same thing happen to me when I was talking to my parents when that specific event was happening, and my family went to the extent of doing a little bit of a prayer for that 9 minutes, and with no offense to what they had in their mind, it was uh, with all due respect they wanted to you know it's their way of trying to bring out the positivity in them.
Mm,
But uh, I think social media is one of the biggest influences, and I want to agree with you on that
mm,
specifically. And this obsession, uh, I've been looking at this obsession on the larger group of audiences, uh, because it's primarily, I wanted to say, I think social media brings a lot of empowerment to an individual. So if someone has social media in their hand, and I think they have a huge power, so
mm,
they can voice out their opinion, and that can go to a completely random person, and that can affect that specific individual's idea and their thought process. So 15, 20 years before, I didn't have the power to reach out to the prime minister, or and let alone my house owner.
mm,
But right now I have the ability to directly tweet to the highest uh, ranked officer in my country, and there is a slight chance of getting an immediate response from the same person, because social media is so powerful. And I
mm,
think social media brings in a little bit of an individual empowering feeling, and I think that obsession is associated with the empowerment is what I think is going to be the reason behind all of this
mm.
outcomes. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with you again. Yes, it's really no debating the fact that as a individual you have a superpower almost for your voice to be heard by anyone in the planet. So yeah, there is a huge amplification of the voice of the individual with social media. And another problem that I see that's growing a lot, and this might be something that's specific to India, because it's the obsession with WhatsApp and the spread of misinformation on that social platform. Um, I do think that it would be unfair to you know uh, lay all of this criticism on the users, because clearly uh, middle-aged people or middle-aged Indians have never experienced anything like this before. They have never been disconnected to the external world before this, and it's clearly obvious that this sudden way of exchanging information so rapidly has caused them to lose control a bit. um, like for example, I think when we I think we were in like the extreme, like the optimal age range for the social media revolution, right? So when
Hmm.
the likes of WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram, when those got popular, I think we were right in college. um, and this was a time when uh, we had some sense of adulthood, and we were starting to learn stuff. Of course, we made a lot of stupid mistakes with social media, but we were in college and it was okay to make those kind of mistakes. And we were in a process of learning that. And by the time I left college as a much more, you know, uh, mature person, I had learned how to deal with social media, when how to trust the information that I see on social media and whatnot. But for middle-aged moms and dads at the age of 40 to 50, when they're given this completely new thing of social media, it completely overwhelms them with information. And I have had this stance for a long time that people above the age of 40, it's really hard for them to have any kind of change in opinion. I feel like your ideologies are pretty rigid by the time you hit 40. So when these when people in the age of 40 and above are fed information from WhatsApp, it becomes really hard for us to convince them that not all information that is spread to this type of social media is accurate. And it becomes a you know it becomes a problem that affects not just one but a huge amount of people, and the rate with which this misinformation can spread is alarming, because one person could spread it to a group of 100 people, and that could multiply 100 times. It's like exponential spread of misinformation. So I think India just got into this entire social media landscape uh, in an unfortunate time, and a lot of people have not really learned how to use it yet, in the sense, be responsible with it yet. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my god, it just sounds so realistic at the moment, because I was just having this uh, argument with my family and my wife's family a couple of days back, uh, when we were talking to them over uh, WhatsApp, and we were basically video chatting with them, and when we tried to speak to them about a couple of things, and we wanted to make sure that everybody in her family is doing well and everybody in my family is doing well. That's when, just before we had the call, uh, my father sent me a message about the reason why the Prime Minister of India gave that specific order to light the diya for 9 minutes, and it was just pathetic. And I was just trying to, you know, I was losing my patience, but I was trying to make myself uh, composed before I let my anger out, because I was so frustrated. I was going to burst out. But I think uh, as as an individual at the moment, and from a society standpoint, it's inevitably in our hands to
Mm,
you know teach our parents how to use the social media. And
mm,
there was even a fight between my wife and her parents when they were actually following one of that, and then they were trying to forward that to a couple of other people. And in fact, it was a never-ending argument, but at the end of the day, they listened to us, and we made sure that we broke the chain. So I was
yeah.
happy with that. But I don't think, uh, for some reason, India's obsession with social media, and especially with uh, the way such conspiracy theories are getting spread over a large people of people, I don't think it has uh, a stop. As much as I wanted to stop right when I see it, I think it's going to be an extremely huge task, and a difficult one
Mm,
too, because of the number of people who are using it. Especially, and I really like the way you put it when you talked about people who are aged 40 and above, because they have a solid set of uh, uh, ideology already set in their mind, and all their focus right now is to spread as much of information as they can, and then
mm,
forwarding all those conspiracy theories, uh, which in our minds makes no sense at all. For them, it makes a huge difference when they try to
mm,
forward that message. Imagine what kind of an impact that it makes for that particular person in that moment. They would
mm,
feel so empowered that they educated 50 or 60 people in that minute by forwarding that message. It just makes
exactly.
so that's painful as much as it sounds. But I wanted to say it's going to be really difficult. I think I read a news article. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I was reading about it, and I was actually pretty happy about it too. When people were, I think it was about WhatsApp curbing the option of forwarding a message to not more than one person. So I haven't tried that. I don't know if it was specific to a certain country, or if it's specific to a certain region of a country. But I'm really glad at least the spread of misinformation is being dealt in a logical way, because when you present a tool, and when you present a powerful tool such as WhatsApp, Facebook, and social media such as Twitter, it just gives
Mm.
them a vast expanse of absolute superpower that makes
Yeah.
them that doesn't it, what makes you think that they're going to give a responsible comment? So
Mm.
it just goes on and on and on, and as much as I wanted to stop then and there, it's going to be really difficult. But I think this is where uh, uh, we as individuals needs to be responsible. We have to be responsible enough to educate our
Mm.
our parents and their group of people, and you just have to make peace with it when the information is already passed on, and then you just
Mm.
have to try to break the chain somewhere in between.
Yeah. And even when you compare it to the raw availability of or the ease of access to information. So, if you wanted to have information on, let's say, a coronavirus in the 1980s, you would have to drive all the way down to the library, find a book on viruses, I guess, and learn about it. But now there's this unlimited stream of information that's being delivered straight to your mobile phone in your hand, and it's just out of control. There's just no way to police it. Um, yeah, I do agree that it's one of the biggest problems that we're facing, and I honestly don't have any kind of solution to this. Uh, yeah, I do agree that uh, people like us, um, or more educated people in general, need to put in the effort to say that everything coming in WhatsApp is not fact, and people need to be more responsible with the information that they spread. Uh, Another thing, this might be a bit of a digression from the topic, but talking about WhatsApp, there is this, um, you know, a kind of a balance between privacy and accountability. Uh, there has been a lot of people, not a lot, a few people arguing that by companies like WhatsApp and Facebook making their messaging platforms end to end encrypted, right? So
Hmm.
not even the company could look at your messages even if they wanted to. So that sounds like the ideal scenario from a privacy standpoint, right? Nobody knows what you send. Your messages can only be read by the receiver.
Hmm.
But by doing this, what WhatsApp and Facebook in general, are doing is they are completely uh, foregoing all responsibility of the content that's shared on their platform, right? So you could literally plan a terrorist attack on WhatsApp, and nobody is monitoring that. There's no way to know because nobody can access that information. Um, so a lot of people are arguing that maybe there has to be some kind of I don't want to use the word policing, but there has to be some kind of regulation imposed on the type of information that can be shared on WhatsApp. I know it's a obvious breach in privacy, but I don't know. Like at times, you have to weigh the different, like the benefits between privacy and security, uh, and decide which is better for the country as a whole. What are your thoughts on that? I still believe that there has to be some degree of privacy. But yeah, this is a really tough question, right? I
Yeah,
have
that's what
no
I was
absolute
trying to
answer to
understand.
this.
I
Yeah.
don't necessarily have a straightforward answer. I can beat around the bush, but I don't think I would I would expect the social media giants to have a sort of a solution to monitor or
Mm.
somehow uh, have a regulated uh, measure to handle the privacy of our
Mm.
information. But it's in my eyes, it's going to be a total complete data breach, uh,
Mm.
regardless of what type of information that they're looking at. So, but I if talking about the end-to-end encryption, I'm not really a tech geek, and I'm not really uh, and I haven't really dived deep into understanding how that works. But back in my mind, I always I always try to you know tone down my level of uh, I think I take it with a pinch of salt when the big social media giants say that all of our information is uh, end to end encrypted, and nobody other than us can take our data, because at some point in time, I think we've already uh, you know put our information on in the internet, and it's already there. Anybody
Yeah.
can essentially track my location. Anybody can track my information if they have a simplest piece of information. So I don't necessarily agree to the fact that our data is encrypted, but that's a completely different argument. But
Yeah, but
going back to
that's
going back to your question, I don't really think there's a standard that we can have
mm,
to have a regulated way of you know having a measure in place. It's going to be extremely difficult. It's going to be hard, man. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I don't. Yeah, I'm not gonna be. Yeah, I don't want to jump on that bandwagon where they say, "Hey, if they say it's encrypted, it's encrypted." I'm with you on that. The big tech companies are definitely among the people that do not deserve the best of our trust just because of their track record. But
Mhm.
uh, the question really is even if it's not encrypted, Facebook can just say, hey, this is end to end encrypted. And that essentially means that they are washing their hands of all responsibility they hold over the information that's shared on our platform. Whether it's actually encrypted or not is a different question, but they they are just, foregoing all responsibility for everything that's shared on the platform. So, to really simplify this question, if the debate was between um, prioritizing between privacy and security, what would you choose? That's the underlying question here. Do you think a person's privacy is more valuable than the country's security? Is the question.
I agree. I mean, I'm trying to let that sink in, and I want to give you
Yeah,
a,
like
a more
I
realistic
don't
answer. I don't.
like honestly, I don't expect an answer here because I don't have one either. But this has been something that I've
Mhm.
been thinking about. I read Snowden's book very recently, and all I could think of is yes, he was a warrior for the privacy of all the Americans who had their information collected by the government without their permission. But leaking all that information uh, just means that he's created a huge security risk. A lot of external companies, external agencies might know or have the chance of knowing information about American citizens now. So um, that balance between privacy and security is a really interesting question that I think a lot of people need to think about more moving forward because in the age of social media, I think that's going to be a really, really big question that the government has to answer really soon. So, yeah, do you have any comments on that? Or,
Yeah, I definitely support you on that, because just like you mentioned, I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but at the same time, it's something that I haven't really, uh, you know, thought about it for quite some time, because in my view, privacy is as much as important as the security of my data. So, but if you ask me if there is a specific way of you know balancing that, it's going to be extremely difficult. So I don't
yeah,
know. It's going to be interesting. I think to be honest, I haven't really thought about how uh, media uh, or the tech companies are handling that,
okay.
given the fact that how much of our information is already compromised. So it's getting scary at the moment. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So again, let's do another topic shift because I feel we've hit another brick wall here. I want to kind of switch this over to our shared obsession with Sam Harris. Um, Maybe you can get started off with how you heard about him first, and how you're following him currently, and why you relate to him.
I think uh, my first if I have to go back, I'm just trying to think. My first instance of me listening to Sam Harris when I was introduced, I think I was listening to a podcast uh, uh, regarding science, and when I was trying to read books related to spirituality and neuroscience, I was really interested about it. I was looking. I don't want to mention the podcast name here, but I was actually uh, trying to look at the related podcasts available, and surprisingly, fortunately I stumbled upon Sam Harris's podcast, the Making Sense podcast, and it was just when I started to, I have a really strong for people who are listening. I think I have a uh, I wanted to make it clear that I have a really long drive when I go back and forth to my work. I roughly travel about 100 miles a day, so
Oh
I
my
think.
God, that sounds like fun.
No, I hate it. I hate it as much as I hate, listening to, the random conspiracy theories that come in social media. So, uh, but that's when I stumbled upon his podcast, and I listened to one of the episodes about how he talked about the impact that we have on an existing society, uh, where he talked about. I one of the biggest impressions that his podcast made to me was the fact that he was actually giving me information, and it was no crap at all.
Mm,
It was absolutely factual statements, and and given the reviews, and given the type of content, and given the type of people he's having the conversation with, I think it makes a lot more uh, sense to me now than before to
mm,
listen to important facts and statements. I think uh, that's why I started reading more of his contents online. I started subscribing, and a couple of episodes into it, and I was pretty much confident that it's going to be some of my weekly drivers, because I think his episodes are releasing once a week, and
mm,
I think it could be. I have to be absolutely honest. I'm not a regular uh, podcast listener, so I try to filter the topics or the episodes um, depending on what my mood of the day is. So
mm,
if it's going to be a really tiring day, I just go with the most quickest podcast or some of the easy content. And if I wanted to actively listen to something interesting, I wouldn't have any second thought to go to Sam Harris's podcast. But I want to say I've started reading his books, and I think I'm roughly about 10% in completion of one of his books. I think it's called Waking Up, if I'm not wrong.
okay.
So I've also subscribed to his Waking Up app, his content on the internet. So it's uh, and I really like his ideology of how he wants to look at spirituality in more of a uh, from a skill based point of view, rather than
Mm,
rather than mythological and
mm,
you know imaginary stories. I think he wants people like us to look at it from a different approach. So
mm.
that's something interesting. I think I am starting to like that.
Yeah, it does look like you've taken a liking for his for the spiritual side of Sam's work, especially his meditation side of things. Yeah, and I I'm not done reading Waking Up as well. I think I'm 80% through it. And yes, there is a lot of value to his theories on meditation and spirituality without religion. Um, but I think we'll save that part of his work for a different podcast. I feel like there's enough content in that for a podcast on its own. But the topic that I want to discuss about that's that I feel would kind of link to the social media thing that we were discussing, um, is the entire argument on free will. Um, are you aware of Sam's argument on this, or
No, I'm not. So, I mean, is there something that you want to share with
okay?
me?
Uh, yeah. So I'll kind of give you a. I'll try to do as best a job as I can trying to get this point across, but I have to warn you that it's fairly complex. But um, here we go. So let's get started by trying to define as best as we can what consciousness is. The definition that Sam uses the most, and honestly the one I best understand, is from Thomas Nagel's paper, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? The basic argument in this paper is that an organism can be considered to be conscious only if there is something that it's like to be that organism.
Mhm.
Uh, the example, quite popularly and as the title suggests, used by Thomas Nagel, was that of a bat. So he argues that it has to be like something for the bat to be a bat, right? We certainly don't expect it to be any similar to what it is like to be human, but for a bat to be considered conscious, it has to feel a certain way to be it. Again, we really don't expect bat consciousness to be anything like human consciousness.
Mhm.
There really is no way to tell if sonar vision is anything like human eyesight, for instance. But it has to be a certain way for the bat to have that sonar vision for the bat to be considered a conscious organism. So that's really our starting point, right? They're trying to understand what consciousness is. It has to be like something to be a conscious human. Um, and if you think about it, this really is our only interface through which we could experience basically anything. Everything that we can perceive, external or internal, has to be through this interface of consciousness. And I think that's really important to understand. And then moving on to what we are really interested in is free will, right?
Mhm.
So
Okay.
free will really uh, is the feeling that you are the author of your own thoughts.
Okay.
The feeling that the actions you do are completely because you chose to do so.
Mhm.
Let's say you decide to eat pizza for dinner. The feeling that you made that decision purely because you wanted to, that right there is free will, right? So you are the author of your own thoughts is basically what free will is. And all religions, well, at least most of them, assume that humans have this free will. So um, religions basically it says that uh, every human in this world is free to make their own decisions, and these religions have their own set of doctrines, really. And if you make the right choices, you get rewarded with an eternity in heaven.
Mhm.
The basis of religion is really simple when you think about it. Actually, you have a set of rules. You're expected to follow it, and if you choose to follow it, you're rewarded with heaven in the afterlife.
Mhm.
Um, and again, it's really important to understand that religion just falls apart without this concept of free will, right? Because if people are not free to choose what they want to do, one can easily argue that everyone who chooses to follow a religious doctrine does so due to factors completely out of his control. So,
Mhm.
um, for religion to have any kind of merit, free will needs to exist, and this is exactly the point where Sam and several other neuroscientists disagree with religion. Really, they argue that free will is an illusion. That there really does not appear to be any substantive evidence, right, for free will to exist from a neuroscientific standpoint. Everything that we do, every choice that we make, uh, basically every thought that arises, neuroscientists argue, is a is a result of several external factors. Like it could be genetics, it could be the environment, and sometimes it's just pure random firing of neurons in the brain. So the argument from a scientific standpoint really is that nobody is the author of their own thoughts, although it certainly feels that way. Um, Thoughts just appear in our consciousness for us to experience. We really have no control or how these thoughts arise. Like I said, these thoughts just arise due to external factors, like various factors. Like I said, your genetics, your the environment, and whatnot. Uh, we can really only witness these thoughts as they appear in our consciousness, um, because, like I said, consciousness is the only interface through which we can really experience anything. So uh, we only experience these thoughts in our consciousness and really have no control um, over how these thoughts appear, really. And it's really not that hard to break this illusion down, actually. So, as an exercise, you could close your eyes for a second and listen to the voices in your head. There definitely seems to be some kind of a voice in your, almost like a person in a head, right? And most of the time, it's your voice, but also you're in constant conversation with this voice. So, what's really going on here? It certainly feels like a self resides in your head, like a focal point from which all your thoughts arise, almost like a tiny person sitting in your brain who's authoring all your thoughts. So if you are the author of your thoughts, you should be, or if you feel like you're the author of your thoughts, you should certainly be uh, in a position to be able to get these thoughts to stop appearing, right? So, but the second you try and do that, the second you try and mute all these thoughts in your brain, the second you attempt to stop these thoughts from arising, is when you realize that you have absolutely no control over these thoughts that arise in your brain.
Mm.
Thoughts just arise. The thoughts are generated. The thoughts, like I said, it's just created by external factors, none of which are essentially in our control. We really are like a boat with no paddles, really. And we just move in whatever direction the river takes us. Um, why it feels like we possess a free will and we author our own thoughts is totally a different discussion. But the punchline really is that we are not the author of our own thoughts. This is a bit of a tricky concept to get your head around, but once you do, you basically understand that nothing that you kind of decide is ever decided by a self in you, but is decided by the environment that you grew up in. That is, it's decided by your genetics. It's decided by the events that followed uh, uh, your brain making that decision. So
A
you
lot of
really are
different
not.
things,
Yeah,
essentially.
you're really not in control of the thoughts that appear in your brain. So why I wanted to bring this topic up today is because of the entire social media thing. So Yuval Noah Harari, in his book Homo Deus, he argues that because we know that there's no free will and we're not actively the authors of our own thoughts, external factors become hugely influential on the society, right? So
Mm.
if you took the election in 2016, uh, Russians were essentially able to program millions of Americans through social media uh, to to vote for the person that they wanted to, right? So uh, the level of influence that social media has on the decisions that we make is beyond, you know, it's not benign anymore. Like you could actively make people think what you want them to think by gaming their social media feed. If you expose them to enough content on certain things, their mind has already been changed without them even realizing it.
I understand.
So in Yuval Noah Harari's book, he mentions some scare. I'm pretty sure I'm quoting this. I'm getting the data wrong, but a Facebook algorithm can answer a personality questionnaire about you with better accuracy than your colleague if you if you just liked 10 things on Facebook, right? So when I say a personality questionnaire, that's it's essentially a gauge of how much the algorithm knows you as a person. So you could interpret it as if you liked 10 things on Facebook, like 10 posts or 10 pages or whatnot, the algorithm would answer a personality questionnaire about you better than your colleague. And with 100 likes, it does better than your family members. And with 300 likes, the algorithm does better than your spouse would. So that's the level of accuracy with which these algorithms will be able to judge us and understand our thoughts. So moving forward, there's this huge concern that large corporations might be able to deliver content to us that will force us to think in a certain way, and uh, you know, completely get rid of, I mean, shatter this feeling of self. Even though we think we are the author of our own thoughts, we're completely influenced by an external factor here, and this seems to be a huge concern that some of the neuroscientists are sharing in the current age, and it is also something that I've been thinking of for a long time now, and I know it's if this is the first time you're hearing it, I think it might be a lot of information to process all at once. But do you have any thoughts that arise right right now on this?
I just to wrap my head around this, I think some of which is something that I've already heard in the past.
Mm,
Specifically, the decision that we make is not necessarily ours. It's just a manifestation of a lot of different variables and factors around us that tend
mm,
to influence us. That's something that I've heard in the past, but I haven't necessarily put that in a specific definition. But but something that I didn't know is when you started to talk about the details behind Sam Harris's content, where you specifically mentioned about how the decision that you make in your brain is not necessarily yours.
mm,
It could be something that's already programmed, and then you're just an observer
exactly.
receiving that. And I believe it's to put it simply, uh, you do not have uh, you do not make a conscious effort uh, to decide what you're thinking about. It's more or less responding to what's something already reflected uh, as a response, and then you are basically following that. Is that correct, or am I trying to get that?
Uh, Almost even if you put in the conscious effort
Mm-hmm.
to you know the farthest you can go is to actually realize that these thoughts are appearing in your consciousness. There's still physically no way to actually control the thoughts that arise. Thoughts
Mm-hmm.
just arise. So there's even if you put in a conscious effort to realize that thoughts are arising, that's where the buck stops. You can't go further than that. I think that's what Sam wants to get at with his meditation app. So he wants to train people to be able to uh, see thoughts arise in the consciousness. That way, for example, if you're anxious or angry, you can witness angry thoughts appearing in your consciousness, and you can treat it for and you can take it as what it is. It's just a thought that arose in your consciousness, and you know that with time that thought is going to pass away. There's no way to prevent that thought from arising because like you said, that's totally beyond our control. But you can certainly be in control of how you react to the thoughts that uh, uh, appear in your brain. But um, again, I want to get that clear here. Like when I say react, again, that is again encoded by your brain. But the action of observing that thought as a thought, rather than experiencing anger, uh, often helps you to have a more sane reaction, uh, rather than being, completely out of control when it comes to your emotions. So that is the reason why he advocates meditation as a tool to kind of, keep on top of all the emotions that arise in your brain.
I understand. I
Hmm.
think it's surprising me to an extent, and at the same time, it's quite frankly a little frightening to know that we do not have control over our own thoughts and conscious.
Hmm.
When you specifically um, give me an example of how when you try to mute all your thoughts, when I think about it, it's just impossible for me.
Yeah.
That's actually frightening. So it's something to think about, but I don't necessarily know uh, how we can have a control over something that's out of our
Not.
hands.
Yeah. um
Interesting.
Okay, so I feel like we could take this up on a podcast of its own. So I
Hmm.
kind of want to wrap this up because we're almost hitting 2 hours now. We're
Hmm.
coming close to that. So
Okay.
I want to kind of wrap this up by giving you a chance to talk about all the things that's currently in your radar, of the things that you're worried about, things that you worry about on a regular basis. It might be personal, like things that you want to change about yourself. It could be things about the entire human species. Um, do you have anything on the top of your head that you're currently worried about or thinking about anxiously?
Sure. I want to start this off on a very personal note, and I want to start it from myself.
Hmm.
So, due to the recent events, the recent pandemic surrounding the coronavirus, I think uh, I've gone to a point where I've started to realize how I've been reacting to a lot of the events that happened in the past couple of weeks.
Mm.
And if I go back in time, specifically to first week of March, I think that's when a lot of people started to realize this could be a potential global threat. But
Hmm.
it was still uh, way below the it wasn't a flashing red, uh, of, and it wasn't a flashing danger for a lot of people. It was quite honestly for me, from a personal standpoint, I wasn't thinking that this is going to be a huge issue. But
Mm.
once I came back from India, roughly about the second week, when we hit the second week of March, is when everybody turned their cameras towards the US, and everybody wanted to know what's US going to do with this specific issue, given
Mm.
that it's already going out of control and people don't even know what to do with this, with no vaccination or no sort of testing,
Yeah.
so to speak. So what I started to realize now is that uh, I, I I wake up I used to wake up every morning. The first thing that I do is, open up. I have this really bad habit of, opening up Twitter in the morning, trying to see what's trending.
Yep.
And I think I have to stop doing that because it started to have a toll on my mental health,
Mm.
and it started to reflect on my day-to-day activities, starting from
Mm.
living with my family, and I recently moved in with my wife. I'm staying with my brother right now and his family, so they were able to see how just these sort of events is affecting me as a person, because I used to
Mm.
overreact uh, to be to these kind of events. So for me personally, I think I, I've gone to a point where I've started to realize that I have to uh, take everything down a notch, and try to let it go as it is, and just hope for some sort of a miracle to happen. Uh, you know, somebody around the globe uh, eventually come up with some sort of a vaccine or a cure to end this pandemic altogether, just like how we were treating the previous widespread viruses, like
Mm.
the the swine flu, the Ebola, and all that stuff. So, on a personal note, I think I have to start uh, realizing that all of these events, which are totally not in our control, uh,
mm,
it should be dealt in a more light way. And
mm,
I've and a lot of people who are close to me know that once I get into uh, a mode which I call as self-destructive mode, because uh, I take I go to it, I zone out on a personal on a different space, and I
mm,
start to overthink about different possibilities of how this could go wrong, even though I know for a fact that I don't have any control over what's going to be the outcome. So
mm,
that's something that I'm trying to work on, and that's why I started to subscribe to Sam Harris's meditation, and that's one of the driving forces that
mm.
wanted that's why I push myself to do something productive, and I'm hoping that it's going to be useful to me moving forward.
Have you been meditating on a
Yes,
regular basis?
I've started to do that from last week, and I have to say it's initially it was difficult because I think it's just a way how you how you deal how you deal with any sort of skill. So, say
Mm,
for example, if you're trying to learn a language, a different language, it's going to be difficult, and you have to uh, take that with just have to bite the bullet and just go forward with it,
mm,
hoping that you would master that. But, as in when you progress and when you try to understand the fruits
mm,
of your progress, and when you're trying to make the progress, and when you see that reflecting on your day on a daily basis, uh, I think that's something that I'm looking forward to. I'm definitely trying to put in all my efforts to follow that on a daily basis. Just something that I'm actually proud of, because I've hit the 10-day streak of continuing that meditation. So
that's
it's
really good.
something, yeah, and I'm hoping that it's going to be useful too, because
Mm.
uh, I've heard a lot of good reviews about his content, and I have a strong feeling that it's going to be useful down the line.
Yeah,
And
I think I
and
started that
mhm.
and I couldn't get past day two. So you definitely have more resilience than I do. So good luck.
Yeah, it's a huge task.
Mm,
Just trying to set yourself down in a calm, composed environment. Right now, it's going to be, and trying to follow something that's it's new. It's going to be difficult. Try to put those pieces together. Uh, you eventually have to do something different and hope that it just works out together.
mm.
And hopefully, I've been fortunate enough to go to that 10-day streak. So I wish to follow that moving forward.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that this has been also something that not just you, I think even me uh, and a lot of people have had to deal with during this pandemic, and that is this anxiety. And yeah, like I did also have to stop myself from looking at the stats every morning because it was just at one point it was just getting alarming, and like you said, it starts to affect the people around you. I cannot agree with you more that there are some cases where there's personal actions that you can do, right? Like staying home,
Mhm.
and that's as far as you can go. And being worried about things that you can't control beyond that, is just a recipe for disaster. So yeah, that is definitely, I think, both you, me, and a lot of other people have been dealing with during this pandemic. um, yeah, I am also trying to cope with that. um, so what about the other stuff? Are you thinking about uh, any are there concerns on a global level that uh, is in your radar? What did had you been thinking about pandemics before this one hit us?
No, to be quite honest with you,
Mhm.
I've never really thought about this, but I was really confident about our healthcare advancements, and
Mm,
not that I really follow what we do and what we try to achieve in that
mm,
field, but I was really confident that we would be able to mitigate all sorts of healthcare diseases. But this is just going out of proportion, and then
yeah.
this sort of proves a point to us, saying that when things go out of control, and then all we can do right now is just to when one of the biggest, when some of the biggest minds in the industry don't have the answers
Mm,
to a simple question, that goes to show how weak we are as a humankind. Which means, we try to race uh, as much as we can, and
mm,
establish and discover new technologies, and
mm,
invent new solutions. But at the
mm,
same time, when you get hit with some sort of an unknown event, or uncertain events, uh, it just breaks you down. And a lot of the number of deaths on a daily basis for this recent pandemic is, I believe, is gone over 80,000, if I'm not wrong. Or maybe my numbers
oh,
could be completely wrong.
no, that's way off, I think. Yeah, but
Oh, is it? Okay. I mean, I just wish, I wish the numbers are smaller than that, but I,
oh no, you're right. Wow.
oh, am I?
You're talking about the entire planet, right?
Yes, the entire globe.
Oh, it's at 95,000. I thought we
That
were
was
talking about
close.
the U.S. Okay,
No, I'm talking about the entire globe, because
okay, okay. Yeah.
it's
Oh yeah,
it's
that's
it's it's not
crazy.
it's not so for me to wrap my head around something this huge, and me being a part of it, the best that I can do is just stay home,
Mm,
and uh, to realize the number of people uh, that are putting their lives at risk, uh, just to cope with this new pandemic, is just, as much as I want to appreciate them,
mm,
it just rises a thought uh, of how powerless as a creature we are.
mm.
So I, I just wanted to hope. I just want this to get down, and I just wanted to get this over with as much as soon as we could.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
something else. If you want to shift the focus out of this coronavirus, I think something that's always been on the back of my mind is global warming,
Mm,
and no matter how much of scientific evidence you show and you prove, uh, some of the world leaders don't think that it's true, and they don't react to it uh, quickly. And as a human force, I wish we are a lot more proactive. I wanted us to be a lot more proactive and not be reactive.
mm,
So uh, I don't know
yeah,
how far we are in terms of mitigating that risks in terms of global warming, but I wouldn't be
yeah.
surprised if 50 years or 70 years down the line, you and I sitting in a condo or a different apartment, looking at the news, saying that we're going to hit on a different. I wouldn't be surprised if something huge happens, and
Mm,
I wouldn't be. I, I think our generation would be the one to blame. What do you
yeah.
think about?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Even for me, just going a little back on the things that you said, uh, a pandemic was definitely not on my top three things on my list that I
Mhm.
was thinking about. It was definitely, like I said, global warming was right up there, and I, I was also pretty alarmist about AI and nuclear war. Um, but yeah, the global warming thing, it is a big problem, primarily because it requires the entire world to kind of agree on it, right? And like, you cannot have um, half the world uh, take actions and the rest of the world not take any actions and solve this problem, because the problem of global warming crosses borders, and what and every country on the planet needs to contribute, and that seems to be such a difficult task in the current political climate, because like the countries have seem to have they seem to be moving towards extremely nationalist societies where they only want to look after themselves and don't want to work with other nations. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a problem right there. But yeah, I don't want to get in detail about any of these, but yeah, like global warming is the biggest one. I do think about artificial intelligence a lot. I
Mhm.
think about nuclear war. Uh, on the pandemic thing, yeah, I hadn't been thinking about it too much recently, so it did completely hit me out of left field. I was totally unprepared for it, but I do remember at least. I think this was when I was doing my bachelor's degree, so that's at least 4 years ago now. When I was talking to one of my friends who was doing a medical degree, and he was talking about how we are completely unprepared for a superbug. So he was talking about bacteria. He was talking about drug-resistant bacteria that
Hmm.
has evolved to resist all the antibiotics that we currently have. And he was complaining about how um, there's no incentive for medical companies to make drugs for diseases that don't exist yet because they just don't have a market to sell it. Like there's no incentive to make a drug for a bacteria that might be drug resistant in like 10 years, but when that infection hits, we're gonna be so unprepared for it that it's gonna be scary. But this was a conversation that I had with him like 4 years ago, and I completely forgot about it. But yeah, like 4 years down the line, and we're still unprepared, and I don't know how we can change that. I still don't know how we can incentivize this unless the government actively tries to funnel money into this, because I don't see this uh, as the free market. Like there's no way that a private drug company would invest in making a drug for a disease that doesn't exist yet.
Hmm.
So it has to be some kind of an effort from the government to make that kind of advancement. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think we've been going on for quite a bit now, and I think
Yeah.
we should try and wrap this up. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else to add, or we can
Just
start
a
wrapping
just a
this
quick
up?
observation that I
Hmm.
wanted to ask you to see if you faced a similar situation just like I did. Were you
Hmm.
surprised when you saw uh, a video from TED pop up on your YouTube recommended videos where Bill Gates was
Oh
explaining
yeah,
about were you surprised when you saw that video or weren't you?
I had
Or
apparently already watched it.
or
So yeah,
yeah.
like again, like I feel like a lot of this had just slipped out of my brain.
Okay.
So like
And
yeah, like
I think that's the exact representation of when you extrapolate that to a global scale. I, I, I won't be surprised if a billion or more people forgot uh, the same particular video
mm,
or the content that was shared, because that goes to show how much. Uh, I mean, on a personal note, I grew up. It took a whole lot of effort from me
mm,
to wrap my head around it, because uh, when 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 a person on that stage is able to forecast such an event in the future, I think
mm,
that video's surface was initially surfaced on the internet roughly about in 2015,
mm.
and that was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
And if he was able to forecast that 5 years ago, and we still didn't get prepared,
I,
what
I
else?
think
What else can we do?
I think he was doing his bit. Like to be completely fair on him, I think he was funding a research that was trying to develop an influenza vaccine that would
Mhm,
work on every single strand.
mhm.
But yeah, like I think there's just not enough people working on this, and there's not enough incentive for the major pharma companies to get into this research because there's not any money that will motivate them to do it, which is kind of
Yeah,
sad.
yeah. Just wanted to know what's your thought on that, because I was taken aback because I haven't seen that video until recently.
Mm.
So it was a shocker to me.
Yeah, even I think there's also a video Sam on Joe Rogan, I think
Hmm.
6 years ago, where he's
Hmm.
talking about a global pandemic. So it's not
Oh
like
wow.
a lot of people did expect this to happen,
Hmm.
but yeah, we're just so unprepared for it, and it's startling.
Yeah.
Okay, on that extremely optimistic note, I think we'll wrap this up. Uh, it was a pleasure having you on, and I hope we can have more conversations like this moving forward. I expect to be doing a lot more of this, especially in this quarantine time. So I'm looking forward to having you on again.
Thanks a lot, Rishi. Pleasure's mine.
Okay.